Hello there my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this super easy macrame bracelet that anyone can make, even if you're a complete beginner. And you can use whatever materials you have handy as well, and they would make great friendship bracelets. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. Now I'm using a c-lon cord in this deep burgundy colour. You can of course use other types and thicknesses of cord, they'll just give you slightly different results. And then to decorate along the edge, I'm going to use these 4mm pink stardust beads. Of course, again, you can easily use other kinds of beads if you prefer. Now I'm going to use this Project Macrame board to work on, along with these T-pins. They're going to help hold our work in place as we're working with it. And of course, we also need a pair of scissors to be able to cut our cord with. Now you'll also want glue or a lighter, depending what kind of cord you're working with, to be able to finish off the ends with. So let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. We then need to cut some lengths of our cord, so I have 5 lengths here of about 1 meter each, and what I've then done is made sure all the ends are even, and then I tied a knot to hold them together, but I've made sure to leave a tail of about 20 centimeters there. We're going to use that to finish off at the end. Now I've then got my board out here ready, and I've got my cords with the long end pointing towards me. I'm then just going to attach this and fasten it down to the board so we get a bit more of a secure working area. So I'm taking the pins here, I'm just going to put them through that knot that I made to secure it down. So something like that. And then we have our 5 long cords here pointing downwards towards us that we're going to be working with. Now we're going to start from one side and work our way over towards the other side. I'm going to work from left to right. You can work the other direction, it's whatever suits you the most. So I'm kind of just separating out my cords here. The very furthest left one, I'm just going to leave that out, and then I'm going to grab the very next one and then bring that over towards the right, over the other ones here that are coming down below now. Then I'm going to grab the next one towards the right, so the first one that we run into here, and we're going to make our very first knot. So the cord that I brought over all the others that's towards the right is the holding cord, and the one that's coming underneath here is the working cord. So I'm going to bring the working cord around the holding cord and make sure to bring it up through the loop of itself here underneath. So if I just pull it through, and you can see that the working cord now loops around the holding cord. And then as I'm tightening this, I want to make sure I hold the holding cord in the direction that I want this row of knots to go. So out towards the side, coming down a bit of an angle. And then we need to make another one, so repeat the same thing. And then tighten that next to the first one. And this is now a double half hitch knot. And then we can grab the very next cord that's coming underneath there and then do the same thing. So we need to make the double half hitch knot. Again, it loops around the holding cord and comes through the loop of itself, and you can also see it kind of creates a 6 as it's going around the holding cord. And then we just tighten that, and you're going to be able to see we're now kind of starting to see the row build of the knots here. Make the other half of the knot, tighten that. And then I'm grabbing the last cord out towards the right that's coming underneath, and again make a double half hitch. Do the other half of the knot to finish it off. And there we now have a row of knots. So I'm just going to leave this cord, the holding cord that we've been using, out towards the side that it's naturally going to. Go back to the left here, and then I'm going to grab the cord that we left in the beginning, and then bring that over all the same working cords that we were just using. And then I'm going to make another row of knots now below the first one. So grab the very first working cord here that we used first before as well. Make your double half hitch. And then as we're tightening this, we need to make sure that this row gets right underneath the first row and as tight as possible. So make the other half of the knot to fasten it in place. As I'm then tightening it to ensure the rows get as close as possible, you want to just push the holding cord upwards a little bit. Grab the next one. So instead of having it come straight out, just kind of push it up over the other row, just ever so slightly. And that ensures that they get as tight as possible basically. right underneath each other, and the last one to finish off this row. Tighten that, and then you're going to be able to see we have 2 rows of knots lying right underneath each other, nice and tight together. Now what we need to do is start another row of knots below these, but it needs to be kind of off a little bit. So out of these 3 working cords we've been using, I'm going to take the very first one to the left, leave that out, and then I'm going to grab the middle one here, and this is going to be our new holding cord. So bring that over towards the right, and then the last working cord from the previous row, we're just going to make our first knot for this new row with, and again tighten that right below the previous row, make that double half hitch, and there we go, that's the beginning of a new row. Now the next working cord is going to be the holding cord from that previous row, so I'm going to take that and bring it underneath the current holding cord, and then use that as the next working cord. So again, make your double half hitch with that, and then we just continue this row and the other half of it to fasten it in place. And then this row is kind of coming further out than the previous one, which is what we want. Now what we need to do is make another knot for this row here that we're currently making, and we need to use the holding cord from the very first row that we made, but it's a bit of a gap, and this is where it's a perfect fit to add in a bead. So I'm going to grab a bead, and before I use this cord, I'm going to add the bead to it, and I'm going to let it drop all the way down. And then as I'm bringing this down and underneath the current holding cord, you're going to see that it slots in just perfectly in that little gap there. So instead of just having the bare cord, we have a nice little decoration with the bead. And then otherwise use this now working cord with the bead on to make a double half hitch and finish off this current row that we're making. Tighten that, and there we go. We've now completed this row, and you can see we've trapped a bead in place. So what we're basically going to be doing is 2 rows right underneath each other continuously throughout. So this was the first one for this little section, which means we need to make the next one that comes right underneath it, right up close against it. And for that we're going to use the cord that we left out in the previous row as the new holding cord. But again, as you can see on this side, that means there's going to be a bit of a gap, and again that means it's a perfect place to add in a bead. So before I use this cord, I'm just going to add my bead, let it drop all the way down, and you can see just slots in perfectly. And then you just want to bring it over all the other cords here, the working cords from the previous row that are coming underneath it now. And then I take the very first one, make sure you always grab them in the right order so we don't get them mixed up. Make your double half hitch, and then as we tighten this, just make sure the bead stays in that gap there, and again tighten this row as tight as you can up against the previous one. Do the next working cord, make your double half hitch, and remember just to push the holding cord up over the previous row to make them as tight as possible. And there we go, and we have 1 working cord left. Now if you're not too familiar with macrame knots, I do have a tutorial where I go through and teach all the basic knots. It might be helpful, so I'm going to leave a link to that in the description box down below. But otherwise, as you can see, that is now completed that row, and we again have 2 rows of the same length right up close against each other, and they're just a little bit off from the 2 previous ones, so they're kind of going to be staggered like this all the way down until obviously we reach the length that we want. So this is what we're going to keep doing now. We're now just going to repeat exactly what I just showed you. So that means to start the next row, we need to leave out the first of the previous working cords there, and we need to take the middle one, bring it over towards the other side, and then the last working cord from the previous row is coming underneath, and that's going to be the first working cord for this row. Tighten that, and that's the beginning of our new row with a double half hitch here. We grab the holding cord from the previous row, bring that underneath the current holding cord, and then make your double half hitch, now extending the row beyond the previous one. And then we're going to use the remaining holding cord on this side, but remember we have that gap, so I'm just going to add my bead to fit in just perfectly. Let that drop down and then bring it straight underneath the current holding cord, and then make your double half hitch, while of course making sure the bead stays in that little corner, and then complete this row just like that. And now we take the cord that we left out previously, so furthest left one, and again we have the gap, so just add the bead, let it drop down, bring the cord over the other working cords here. So again I'm going to take the very first one, make my double half hitch, tighten that as close to the previous row as possible, grab the middle one of the working cords, and again make sure the rows gets as tight as possible to each other. And the last one, make your double half hitch to complete this row. And then we again have two even rows right up tight against each other. They're the same length and they're slightly off from the previous two rows. So just continue like this all the way until you have the length that you need. So now reach all the way to the other end here, and as you move along and make your piece longer, you just want to move your pins along with you as well, just to fasten your work in place. It makes it easier to work with. But now what we need to do is finish off the ends here. So what we've ended up with is 3 towards one side and 2 towards the other. And this is where we would start the next section of 2 rows right underneath each other if we were continuing. But instead of that, I just want to kind of finish off the end ready to be able to make our clasp part. So I'm going to take the outer of the 3 cords there, bring it over the other 2, and then I'm going to grab the middle of them and then make a double half hitch with that around the holding cord. So now we're just kind of starting another row, but it's just to finish off with here. Grab the next one, make a double half hitch with that one, tighten those. Then I'm going to go to the other side, because now we have 3 on this side, and take the outer one of them, make that the holding cord by bringing it over the other ones. Then I'm going to take the very next one, so the middle one out of the 3, make double half hitch with that one. Now this is going to create a row right across the ends of the other rows that we have going the other direction. Do the other half of the knot and just kind of finish them off nicely. Use the remaining cord to make your last knot just like this, and then here I've gotten this end ready to make our clasp with. Now you just want to flip your piece around and do the same thing on the other end as well. So that's with the length of cord that we left in the beginning. So now that we've finished the main part of the bracelet, we need to finish off the ends. And what I'm going to be doing is the sliding macrame knot. Now you do have other options. So what I'm going to do is leave a link to a video where I show different ways of finishing off the ends here. But like I said, I'm going to be just showing you the macrame sliding knot. So what I'm just going to do is on one end, we have 5 cords coming out. The furthest one to the side of the side that has 3 going towards it there, I'm just going to push that out of the way and just focus on these 4. So we have 2 in the middle and 1 on either side. The 2 in the middle are going to be our holding cords, so they're going to come straight down. I'm just doing this kind of freehand, but you can still work on the board if you want to. What I'm going to be doing is just basic square knots now. So I'm going to take the left one over the 2 holding cords, and then the right one goes over that, underneath everything in the middle, and then up through the loop here on the other side. And then we just need to tighten the cords all the way up to where the other knots are, and then just pull that nice and tight. Now I'm going to start with a cord from the other side, bring that over, the other one goes over that, underneath everything in the middle, and up through the loop, and then tighten that. And that is our first full square knot. And I'm just going to make a couple more just so we have a bit of an end here. So I ended up just making 3 square knots. That's going to be plenty. And of course you just want to go to the other end and do the same thing. And we're doing this because now we then have a bit of a transition from the main bracelet part to what's then going to be the sliding knot. Now to make the sliding knot, we just need to cut another short length of our cord here. This is just about 30 centimeters or so, because then we need to use that to make the actual knot with. Now I'm going to grab my piece. Both ends are ready. So what I'm going to do is take the holding cords from one end, gonna shape the bracelet, and then take the holding cords from the other end, and then basically bring them together and just have them overlap like this. So we're now going to have 4 holding cords. I'm going to then grab my new length of cord and just grab the middle part, put that behind these 4 holding cords. And then we basically just need to repeat what we just did. So make a few square knots, and it's just a bit tricky in the beginning just because you're holding on to everything. But once you've made the first knot, that's going to hold everything together. So we start out our first square knot here and pull that tight. And I like to tighten my knots quite a lot because it will loosen up over time, and I don't want it to get too loose. So the first time you're going to kind of pull it open and close, it's going to be pretty tight, but from then on it's going to be easier. Make the other half of the square knot and tighten that. And don't worry about how open this part is yet. And you can make however many knots you want here. That will then determine how large your clasp is going to be basically. So just make however many square knots that you want. So I've ended up with 6 knots here. I feel like that's a good amount. Now what we need to do is start getting rid of most of our cords. So we need to basically get rid of all of them except for the ones that we just used as holding cords. So these 4 cords here. Otherwise we want to get rid of the rest. Now how we do that does depend on the type of cord that you're using. So this is a synthetic cord, which means I can use a lighter to finish off, which is what I'm going to be doing. If you're using a natural cord, you have to use glue or something like that. But what I'm going to do is basically first of all cut off the excess but leave a short little tail. I'm just going to kind of do one or a couple at a time. So cut off the cord. And then as you can see, there's a short little bit left, and that part I'm going to then singe down. So basically melt using the lighter. Now obviously be careful because it is a naked flame that we're working with and it does get hot. But I basically melt that using the lighter, and then you can just use the lighter itself to press against it to help seal it in place, because that finishes off the cord but at the same time seals it so it's not going to unravel or anything. So you just want to do that with the remaining ones, but like I said, minus the 4 holding cords from that sliding knot. So now get rid of all those ends. You can see it's already a lot cleaner. What we need to do is just finish off the ends of the holding cords as well, but we need to add a stopper because as you can see, otherwise we'll be able to pull them through that sliding knot. So first of all, what I'm going to do is actually close it up fully. So just pull the cords so all the knots are sitting right next to each other, because that way it's more likely to get even on the ends here. So what I'm going to do is basically tie some knots further down and also just add a few beads, and they're going to just act as stoppers so they're not going to be able to pull through. But we want to leave a bit of a length here so it's also adjustable in size. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take one cord at a time, and I like to just tie a knot first, and then also I kind of then decide how long I want these to be. You don't want them to be too long, but just a decent length so there's some adjustability, and then just tighten that. It's just a regular overhand knot. Make that nice and tight, and I'm just going to go through all the cords and do that same thing. So just make a regular overhand knot, and then I'm just going to use the first knot as a guide to tighten this one to the same length, and then just pull that nice and tight, and the same for the remaining 2. So now we have those knots in place. I'm going to again just take one at a time, and then I want to grab a bead and just add a bead onto this cord. Let it drop down to that knot, and that knot's going to stop it from sliding down to where the sliding knot is. And then I want to make another knot on the other side of the bead here to make sure that obviously that doesn't fall off or anything. So just make sure the bead stays close to the first knot, and then I'm going to tighten the other knot on the other side of the bead. Now if you're worried about it pulling through the hole, if your holes are larger or something, you can always tie another knot on top of that, but this is going to be fine in this case. And again, just add your beads onto the remaining ones as well and do the same thing. And once we have that, we just again want to one cord at a time get rid of the excess here. So I'm going to cut off the excess after the very last knot, and again just leave a short little end just like that we can then singe down just like we did before, because that's just going to seal the knot in place and it's not going to come undone. So just like that, we've now finished off that length of cord, and of course just go through and do the same with the rest of them. And once you finished off those ends, we have the bracelet finished and ready to wear. So the sliding knot, of course you'll use that as you take the bracelet on and off, open it up, put it on, and then tighten it. And you can again also then use the beads to help pull that easier. And then you have a cute little bracelet. And it makes a great friendship bracelet as well. It's super easy to make, so anyone will be able to make this, I would say, even if you're a fully beginner. And you can really use whatever materials that you have handy as well. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Now I have loads of tutorials on my channel within many different mediums. And if you specifically like macrame, I have a whole playlist just with macrame tutorials as well. So feel free to check that out, and don't forget to subscribe to not miss any future videos. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.